It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's start with this. What teams are out there? Let's lay the landscape out. What teams are out there that have the money to offer Evan Fournier somewhere in that range? We know the Celtics have bird rights, so they can offer him whatever. That doesn't matter. The Celtics don't have limitations really on what they can offer him other than the ones that they put on themselves. But what teams are out there that have the money to spend?
Yeah, so this is where I think it makes a lot of sense to understand the market, right? Because Fournier is going to get more than the mid-level exception. So if you don't have cap space, you're out unless you're doing a sign and trade for him, which that's something we can talk about after for an option for the Celtics. So initially, there's about 7 teams that have cap space, and they're all about $20 million or more. That ranges from the Knicks at the top of the list, who I project will have about $53 million in cap space, to the San Antonio Spurs at about $48 million, Oklahoma City at 46. So and then they're on down. So if we go through those teams, I think the Knicks could be an option. I think we saw in their first round playoff series against the Hawks, they were lacking offensive creation. They were lacking guys who could shoot. So I think that could be in the mix for them. But their challenge is they'd probably want to keep that to a very short-term deal. Now, what they could do is they could go get Fournier and really overpay him on a 1 year or 1+1 deal or something like that, where he makes a ton of money in 1 year and still gives the Knicks a bunch of flexibility going forward. Spurs, they don't seem overly likely. They've got a bunch of guards and wings and younger guys that I think they like quite a bit. Oklahoma City, we know they're not spending money on a guy like Fournier right now. Dallas Mavericks, they would come up next at $34.5 million. I think they've got other plans, but if you kind of strike out on those other plans, I think Fournier could be there. And I don't think Fournier is going to be number one on anybody's list, that they're going to be pursuing him right out of the gate. Toronto's not going to do it. Memphis becomes an interesting team with about $22.7 million. That's if they move off of Justice Winslow. Fournier could really help a team like the Grizzlies as a wing creator and a guy who can shoot. That team really needs guys like that. And then the last team, oddly enough, is the Charlotte Hornets, who I don't think that would make a ton of sense. I think they'd rather just keep Devontae Graham home there and give him a new contract. But if something happened there, that would just, Celtics fans probably won't think it's very funny, but I would think it's kind of funny to, if they went that route again, and maybe Boston could convince them to do it as a sign and trade, and then we kind of roll it over into a new.
That would be fun, huh? Another
right?
Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, people would absolutely lose their minds. So we'll see, right? So that's kind of what the teams that can offer him more than the mid-level. Then you get into sign and trades, and you could probably look at 5-6 teams in the league that maybe would want to do a sign and trade for a guy like Fournier and bring him in. So that becomes kind of the market you're looking at there. But the sign and trades, right? The Celtics have to agree to that. Fournier has to want to go to the team, just like we learned with Hayward last year. So that kind of sets your market. Now, what teams are going to overpay him? Like I said, maybe the Knicks on a really big 1 year deal. I think they give it like what the 76ers did with JJ Redick a couple years ago, where if it's all right, there's nothing else to use, but hey, Fournier, we'll give you $25 million for 1 year because we got to spend money anyway. What if they swooped in with something like that? Does that become more interesting to him? And then he's in the New York market and all the things that kind of come along with that there. But I think you're looking at a contract again somewhere between 15 and 20 million starting salary for Fournier, and I think that the question of is that doable for the Celtics becomes what else do they do with their roster, and how willing and how deep into the luxury tax are they willing to go?
That's the heart of the question here. It's the heart of all of this, the Kemba conversation. All of these conversations about who should stay and who should go hinges on what the Boston Celtics ownership group is willing to pay in a luxury tax. And I feel like I'm going to say this to like my 4th straight podcast. It's easy for me to spend Wick Grossbeck's money over here on a podcast, right? But I don't know what limitations we can say. but their value has grown to $2 billion. They bought the team for like $300 million, whatever the number was, and now it's a $2 billion team, a $3 billion team. But you only get that value when you sell the franchise, right? I mean, I suppose you can borrow against it, but it's not like he's got that money liquid, like just sitting there, like, oh, let me pay this. So I understand there are limitations. I know that Boston is in a different financial position than other teams. They don't own their own building, which other teams do, and that helps in the overall kind of revenue creation. They don't get money from the concessions that they sell. They have to pay rent, which sure, it's probably a good deal, but they still have to pay rent as opposed to a mortgage and owning their own building. So it's different. Their regional network doesn't make as much money. They don't own their regional network. They own a part of NBC Sports Boston, but they don't own the whole thing. So I get it. Not as much money is coming in, so it's not as much money is going to go out. And so I understand there are limitations in Boston. The question now, okay, you still have to build a team around Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. The Celtics probably don't want to go too long-term with Evan Fournier either, right? Mm-hmm. They're not. I don't know if they're going to go. They're not going to go 5 years. They're not going to go beyond what Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown's got 3 more years on his contract. So, do you think they go beyond 3 years for Fournier?
Yeah, probably not. My guess is they would much rather have it be like what I call a 2-1, which is 2 years with a team option attached to the end, or some kind of non-guarantee or something like that. And sometimes you pay a little bit more in those early years to give the guy that, or give yourself that flexibility on the back end. Because I think the challenge for the Celtics is, right now, you don't want to extend money much past when Kemba Walker comes off the books. And you have to kind of approach things until he's not on the team anymore, like he is on the team. So you have to plan that he's going to be on the team for the 2 years left on his contract. So I think what happens ultimately there is they're probably going to look at that and say, all right, well, in 2022, maybe Walker comes off the books. Probably not, because he's going to pick up that player option at this point. So we're really looking at 2023. And in 2023, it's shaping up like it could be a pretty good free agent class. And you would like to be in the mix with your selling point being, hey, come here and play with an in their prime Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Right. And hopefully maybe a couple of the young kids have panned out by that point. And there's our depth pieces. We've got the 2 all-stars. Come in, be that third guy, and here we go. Now we're ready-made title contenders. And I think that's your selling point. So for that reason, you don't want to lock in long-term for a guy like Fournier unless you can do it at a number you feel confident is very easily movable. So one of the things I've thrown out there is it puts you in a little bit of a bind this year, because here's what I don't think enough people are realizing is right now, as the team stands with the guys under contract, so take out the 5 free agents we already mentioned, the remaining 12 players that are under contract outside of Jabari Parker are all on guaranteed contracts. And that money, if you include Parker in there, and this year's draft pick, the number 16 overall draft pick, you are right at the luxury tax line. Not the salary cap, but the tax line. You're right at it. They're like $1 million over at that point. Now, $1 million over is nothing. You can get out of that easy enough. Ship Carson Edwards off with a 2nd-round pick, and you're under. But that's before you did anything else. That's before re-signing Fournier, filling out the roster, any of those things. We know, I think teams now, they don't go into seasons with open roster spots the way they used to. So they'll fill out the roster. Maybe they'll carry 1 open spot, but they'll at least sign a couple guys to minimum deals. So that part is where it gets really interesting, because essentially anything you do with Fournier is going to put you over the tax apron, which then will limit you in how much of the mid-level exception you can use. So it'll be down to that. Now, Boston is in a bit of an interesting place because they only have 3 open roster spots as it stands today. You're taking out the 2 two-way spots, because they've only got the 3 free agents. But if you re-sign Fournier, I know a lot of people really seem to want them to re-sign Luke Cornett. So even if you brought Cornett back on a minimum or close to it, you're well into the tax, and that's the challenge. So now, if you're Brad Stevens in the front office, one of the conversations you need to be having is, can we start the year deep in the tax and then work to get out of it as the year goes along. And if ownership's in agreement with that, or at least lessen it, what you could do with Fournier is start him at a higher number, maybe start him around 18 to 20 million, and then have that contract decline over the life of the deal, because then it becomes that much more movable. Because I think Fournier, the eye test tells me, all the stats tell me he's going to age fine. He's not somebody who's going to fall off a cliff in the next couple of years. He should be fine for, the life of a 3 or 4 year contract. And if you have that contract decline over the life of it, now you're in a better place because it becomes easy to move. It could even become something, if he's a great fit, you could really work around it. But they've got a lot of things to answer. Now, I know this isn't the Kemba Walker podcast, one of 1,000 you'll probably do this off season. Right. But if you move him, now that frees up everything, right? If you move him and take far less money back, then your flexibility increases, tenfold with that. So those are kind of the things with Fournier that I think this is not a cut and dry, re-sign the guy, don't re-sign the guy. There's a lot of other factors that are going to go into keeping him or not.